One. Welcome to Get Your Book Seen and Sold. I'm your host, Claudine Wolk. With us today is Meg Oolders. Meg is a writer and author of the book C. Smile and the creator of the Substack Stock Fiction. You can find her popular Substack at stockfiction.substack.com. You can also find her on her Instagram. She's at @writermelon, RITERMELON, and I'll have that in the show notes. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I found you because I was looking on my Substack and I found Stock Fiction. And I tell you, when I read the one that I read, and I think there was a picture of a cupcake, and I got a little hot and bothered, and my husband was busy that night with me.
Was that caked? Is that the one you read?
Yes.
Yes.
He said,
I was curious if you had read a piece of fiction before you found the Nemesis post. So that was an interesting one that you stumbled upon for sure.
Absolutely. So tell us about your Substack. Where did you come up with that idea?
Sure. So I didn't even know that Substack existed until, let me think, last summer. I sort of just wandered into a webinar. The Authors Guild did like a business boot camp series, and they had two people on the panel. One of them was Elle Griffin, who most people know as one of the more popular fiction writers on Substack, and a woman named Cutruzulla, who I hope I'm pronouncing her name correct. She writes a Substack called Brass Ring Daily, which is a daily newsletter of just inspiring things for creative people, and it's fantastic. So I kind of listened to both of them talk about their own discoveries of Substack and how they ended up there and what it was doing for them and what they were able to do on it. And it sounded very appealing to me. To that point, I had been primarily operating in the kidlit space. I'm a member of SCBWI, which I will slow down when I say this, is the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So I've been a member of that organization since 2015. And back then I was raising very little babies. So I was writing books for very little babies. I was writing picture books and things of that nature. And I took a year-long course with an instructor that's a member of that association. Her name's Jolie Stekly. And during that course, I started kind of growing up a little in my fiction writing and writing some middle grade. And then eventually I sort of landed in the YA space, which is where I write primarily in my novels. And so this just seemed like a space to experiment with some adult fiction, which I wasn't really writing yet. So I was out for a walk. I was like, okay, what can I do? So I think I attended that workshop in like June or July. And then it was around September when I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to have a hook, something that's interesting. So I was just out. And during the course of that Kidlit course that I took, we did a lot of free writing. And a lot of times our instructor would present us with a photo and give us like a short prompt. And so we would kind of work with that. And for some reason, I always did better with the photo prompts than just a standard written prompt. So I was like, oh, well, that would be kind of like a fun thing to do. And then at some point, the name Stock Fiction popped into my head, and that just kind of sealed it for me because I just thought it was catchy. And I was like, okay, that sounds really cool. And so I'm going to go see what I can do with that. So, and I just feel like with stock photography, I'm never going to run out of material. I mean, it's everywhere. I try really hard to find photos that have an actual artist's name attached to them rather, because you can find a lot of pictures and you don't know where they came from. But I always try to find things where I can, give credit to the person who created them, even if they are free to the world. I like to do that. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there. And then even though I made that decision in September and I started my Substack, I didn't post until October. That was my first post that went out. It was October 8th, I think, of last year. So I haven't been on a full year yet. I'm still working through that first year.
And you're doing really well with it. It's a popular Substack.
It's fun. I'm having such a great time with it. And I've been really impressed with just the world that Substack provides. Because I'm kind of, well, I won't say I'm highly social media averse. Yeah. It's not my favorite place to hang out. And it's mostly because you sometimes, if you're a quote unquote nobody, you just feel like you're screaming into a void, or talking nicely into a void, or making a joke into a void, or any number of things into a void. And you see these other people that just have this energy and following, and they're posting all the time, and there are people engaging with them. I'm like, so what's the step that gets you from screaming into a void to being quote unquote popular on those sites? And I don't think there's a secret other than there's robots behind the scenes turning gears, and you just have to hit them the right way with your little hammer. And I wasn't doing that. I was on Instagram, and I'm still on Instagram, but I find I spend most of my time engaging on Substack. And I was on Twitter for approximately 5 minutes, and I left just before it exploded. So I left, I showed up at the wrong time and left at the right time. So, but other than that, I don't do much in the way of social media. So this provided very quick engagement for me. Like my first post went out to 5 people, I think, and they were all people who I signed up for them. they didn't choose. I was like, they were my writers group that I met through that class I mentioned, and we all still meet almost weekly. And so I kind of signed them all up. And of course I told my family about it. So yeah, the first post went out to very few people. And then it just became about letting other people know about it. But then the surprising thing was how many people found it on Substack that I didn't know, and how much better that whole system seems to work on Substack than other places where you're trying to get seen. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And I think part of it is that your universe of target audience is there.
Mm-hmm.
People who are on Substack want to read.
Exactly.
Right. So that helps narrow things down tremendously versus social media, and everybody in the world is on there with all their different interests.
Right.
And I do, to your point about the social media too, I'm with you. I've always had trouble with social media, and I think it's a personality thing. I think there are some people who love to be on talking and commenting, and there are other people who, are just don't, that's not their personality to spend,
Right.
that much time doing that. But when you have something that you want to share and you want to get out there, I think Substack checks the boxes for a lot of writers.
Absolutely. And it provides a lot of different ways to share too. And so many of them I haven't even explored, but because we're talking on a podcast right now, which you have on Substack, and a lot of other people do that. It's definitely something I'm considering doing myself at some point. I have like a clever idea to call it talk fiction, because it's
I love it. That you're branding. Love
right,
it.
exactly.
Yes.
And I've made so many, writer friends that, the funny thing is I tend to connect with the people that are on the same plane as me in terms of where we are in our journeys. So it's like we're helping each other in the sense that we're all here together, and it's really hard. So I'm not sure any of us is going to be responsible for jettisoning someone into the stratosphere of fame and success, but it's still like a really good vibe, and just the opportunity to talk with somebody. And then, you've got a little podcast that you can share on yours, and I can share it on mine. And it's just, I like that element. And at some point, one of those people might be doing really well, and then I'll be glad that I know them.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
meet them when they're down at the bottom, and then maybe they'll remember who you are when they're famous.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of the whole point with social media, for people to connect, and then, for the greater good in whatever form that takes. But with Substack, you really are connecting with folks who have the same goal that you do. They
Right.
either just enjoy writing, or they're writers themselves, and they want to get their work out there. So, and it's simple to use. I mean, there's so many great things about it that,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's one of the reasons that people love it so much.
Right. And it also serves, I think, as like for people that are I know it's easy to start a website now. There's so many different ways you can do it that it's easy for people who don't know how to build a website from, scratch. They have easy ones. But I think that intimidates some writers, the idea of like, okay, now I have to host a website. But I feel like Substack provides that a little bit. It can be sort of a home base for most of the stuff that you're doing, you know, because you can link to your social media there. You can link to your books on Amazon there. So it's, for me anyway, it's kind of doing that job. The only thing and I don't think I did this wrong, but you kind of have the option of what your URL is going to be. And I opted to have it be stock fiction instead of my name. And at the time it was because I was like nervous, I guess, about putting my name on a URL and then being discoverable, which is kind of the opposite of what I want. So, and I'm not sure I'm going to change it now because I feel like I have enough people reading it that might be a bad move to make that switch. But yeah, so I feel like it sort of serves, for me anyway, as that checked box of you have to have a presence somewhere where people can find you. And I feel like it's doing that for me very well, because you found me and now we're doing this.
There you go. And I think, you know, for our audience, for my audience with Get Your Book Seen and Sold, you have to talk about exactly how Meg is using Substack. She's getting her writing out there. She's creating that all important email list, and she's using Substack to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's got this nice, warm audience out there so that when she does publish her books, that is something that she can mention in one of her posts. Now she can say, well, my new book is out and here's an excerpt, or here's where you can download a galley, or if you want to provide me with a blurb, you know, please, you know, have a look and do it and whatever. So instead of having a website where you're connecting, you know, a survey monkey or a constant contact email list, Substack does all of that in one place. Right. And you can do and get out your fantastic writing along the way. It's really such a win-win. And maybe even with subscribers, you're making some money as you go. Right.
I'm not doing that yet. Well, except unless you count my mom, who pays for my Substack.
Gotcha.
But
oh,
it's funny. I actually kind of asked her to pay for my Substack.
There you go.
You know, it's that, you're like, how can I support you and what you're doing? I'm like, well, you could drop me $50
exactly.
a year. Exactly. So, but yes, I absolutely agree. And I think what's different about Substack too is people are choosing to consume your content. People are signing up for it. Yep. And I'm finding most of my subscribers have come from places where I wasn't putting anything out. Nice. They were coming. There are engines at work, I think, in Substack that work very well. Recommendation engine, for one. I do have a fair number of other publications recommending me. And so a lot of my readers come from there, and then a lot of them stick around, but I don't know who these people are. It's really fascinating, because I just assumed I'd be needing to promote more to get to the point I am now. And I've done very little promotion, but that's why I'm talking to you, because I do need to do more. And it's obviously not an area I'm super comfortable self-promoting, but yeah, I've been just very surprised with the growth just from continuing to do what I'm doing, which is just writing and posting. And that's the fun part. So,
right. And you know what that says to me, Meg? That says your content is good. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to good content. I mean, you can do all the promotion you want. If the content's good, no one's going to stick with you.
Right.
So, absolutely. Yeah, what you're putting out there is fabulous. And, you know, maybe you don't need to do a whole lot of promotion. I mean, maybe the folks who are coming to you are going to feed off one another and just keep putting out that good content, and they will come.
Well, and that's really the kicker too. I get hung up on what else can I be doing to make this grow faster or grow bigger. And when I put a lot of headspace and bandwidth on that, I get frustrated because I know I'm not spending that time on the actual craft of why I'm there. And you get hung up on numbers. You know, that's the one thing. They give you that nice juicy dashboard with all those stats, and you're just picking at them, and like, you know, you're like, ooh, the number went up by 2, and then the next day it'll go down by 1. You'll be like, I didn't even do anything. Like, what happened? You know, you think there's some weird mystical negative thing you put out in the universe that made someone subscribe and then instantly unsubscribe. but so it's hard not to pay attention to that number. I try really hard to ignore it, but it's there, and it's obviously everyone's goal to find more readers.
Right. Right.
But what's really should be the goal is finding readers who are reading, because there is that, you have to assume some of that number are the people who have been getting your stuff in their inbox and it's just getting mixed in with everything else and they're missing a lot, and then eventually they snooze on it and they're probably not actively reading everything anymore. But I do have a handful of people I appreciate a lot who always show up in my comments. And so for me, finding a few more of those people might be more the goal than finding, another 500 people who might show up occasionally. Those true fans, that's what we're looking for, right? The people
That's
that
right.
will read anything you write. And
That's
then
right.
they'll buy the book.
There you go. There you go. And I do think it's has so much to do with meeting and finding the right reader for your content, and they will stick around and they will stay with you. And then it's oh shoot, what do you call that? Word of mouth. I mean, one
Yeah.
person tells another person, another